Welcome to the Let's Talk Love podcast, where we flip the script on outdated narratives and cliches about love and relationships. I'm your host, Robin Ducharme, founder of Real Love Ready. This podcast is for anyone who wants to be better at love, regardless of relationship status. We'll talk about the intimate connections in our lives and the challenges and complexities inherent in those partnerships. Through our no-holds-barred interviews with global experts, we'll gain insight about ourselves and learn new skills to improve our relationships. Because when we learn to love better, we make the world a better place. Are you ready for open and honest conversations about love? Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Love. I am so excited to welcome our guest today, Matthias Barker.
Hello. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for joining us, Matthias. I've been following your work and learning from you for a long time. And I recently took your couples workshop course, which was fantastic. And of course, I watch your daily Instagrams and listen to your podcast. And so it is a great pleasure to meet you. I feel like, and I'm sure you hear this from a lot of people that follow you in your community, that you feel like you kind of know you because you're like a regular voice and person that we learn from on a daily basis. So
that's so kind to say. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm glad it
and
comes
it's
off
like your studio, which is, I think, your home, or maybe this is your
I'm actually in my garage. Yeah, it looks
awesome.
Very fancy. If you're looking at the video, it looks fancy. But yeah,
it's
there's
fancy.
Like a cat box over there. There's like some boxes. It's not very luxurious.
So you're in Nashville, right?
Yeah. Nashville,
Beautiful.
Tennessee.
Nashville is such a beautiful, beautiful city, and I love the music scene. It's just, It's so artsy as well. Beautiful art galleries, and really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a city that's actually been shifting and changing a lot too. Just since COVID and everything, it's tons of people moving here. So I'm happy to be here. It's kind of a renaissance of Nashville. We'll see what it turns into.
Yeah. So, Matthias, can you give our listeners a brief, just tell us about yourself and how you became a psychotherapist.
Sure.
And what you're doing in your day to day, because I know you're definitely, active, on social with your podcast and your courses, but you're also work in a clinic,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, I have my own private practice. Yep.
Your private practice.
I'm a therapist. Yeah. So I'm a psychotherapist. I deal with mostly just, all forms of relational trauma. And so that kind of covers a pretty wide span of situations. So I do a lot of couples counseling. The traumas that can present themselves within a couple's situation, either, one or both people having a background, maybe of some sort of trauma that's contributing to some difficulties in the relationship or not. But I find myself talking a lot about substance use and domestic violence and a lot of maybe different presentations of hard relationships, but all maybe within the bounds of how do the experiences that we went through in the past, or maybe experiences that have happened within the relationship, contribute to the trust or the intimacy that people are experiencing. And so that's very common. I do a lot of work with one-on-one with people as well. So people who want to heal from childhood experiences, or people who are trying to work out boundaries they want to set with their parents, or trying to heal a relationship with a kid where there's been wounding. And so I guess my day-to-day looks pretty different depending on who I'm talking to. It's one of my favorite parts about the job is there's always a new, conversation to explore. But all of it perhaps having that common thread of how do we heal from the things that have happened to us. So yeah, that's my work as a psychotherapist. So I do that probably half the week, and then the other half the week I'm doing videos and workshops, and I'm writing, and have a lot of activity online, full of different stuff I'm always making. So between that and some travel, some speaking, I try to cut back on that and spend more time with family. I have two really young kids, and so I keep that at a minimum, I guess is what I'm saying. But I do that occasionally as well. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, I took, like I said in the intro, I took your couples workshop, and I just love your approach, Matthias. Like I learned a lot in the course.
Yeah. What'd you think of it?
I really thought it was great.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, I need to know more about this and this and this. So I thought we would just dive into it. So, and I've got quotes from you. And so you say, when we bond together, we become a more dynamic force in the world. So the idea that I'd like you to talk about this more, please, around how we're wired to bond, but also how a partnership dynamic functions to our benefit. Because you talk about that in the beginning of the course.
I do.
And then we could talk about the bonding.
The whole course, was also kind of undergirded by this idea that, it's beneficial to understand your partner's personality, and specifically to understand.
Yes, I want to dive into that too.
Your partner's personality. And so one of the benefits of that, when you have an appreciation for the ways that your partner's different than you, is that you can actually take both of your perspectives and engage the world in a more dynamic way. Because you could think it's like you're looking at a 3D object from just your perspective. Like, you might be able to notice some things, but in some ways that, as it appears to you, that's a two-dimensional object. You're only looking at one facet, one perspective of that object in your hand. But if someone's standing on the other side, if someone comes from a different point of view, they might see things about that object that you don't see. What looks like a circle to you looks like a rectangle to them, and then it looks like you're dealing with a cylinder. So there's an advantage to bonding and pairing up. And this is just like the principle of any relationship, not just romantic, but having friendships in your life and, living your life embedded within a community of people that you trust and you care about, being a good, even just, citizen of your, country or your state, being able to be involved within your community at whatever level is, to everyone's advantage. If we can have everyone's perspective, if everyone's voice has a place and can be heard, and we can incorporate all of that, that's to our profound benefit. And so when we're talking about bonding, when we're talking about romantic bonding, we're talking about who's the person that you're matching your life with, and who's going to be in the closest proximity to you, both emotionally, physically, just approximately, in your day-to-day life. You sleep next to them, perhaps, whatever. Who's the person that you're leaning on their perspective to engage with the world? And if you are in a deeply untrusting state with your partner or with your spouse, that can be it's not just, emotionally tumultuous to go through, but it actually is a disadvantage to just how you engage with the world. So it's almost,
yes, I
guess in the workshop, I spend a part of the time making almost a pragmatic argument for working through conflict resolution. Cause it's like, why try? Why work all this out? Why go into all these hard conversations and talk about all these, emotionally tense things? Why not just, kind of wait it out and just talk about the things we both agree with and do things that we both kind of like, and then let the other person just kind of live their lives and be themselves. And why do we have to be bothered with all of this, negotiation over everything? And I guess my reply to that is a pragmatic one of, well, when both your perspectives are looking at something, when both of you are trying to figure out parenting, when both of you are trying to figure out your finances, when both of you are trying to figure out, building a house, you're going to have a way more three-dimensional perspective.
Yeah. Yes. And that's one of the things you say. You say a lot of us think that we need to focus and fix our needs and get our needs met.
Yeah.
But when reality, we need to reinforce the bond. Mm-hmm. And when you really go into that, I was like, that makes it makes perfect sense. And it's a much deeper perspective. Then I was like, I'm not feeling good about this. My needs aren't being met, or he's or she's doing this. And right.
That's the first thing people come into couples therapy complaining about. It's like, they're not meeting my needs. Of course they do. It's the other person, and my needs aren't being met. Right. Mm-hmm. But I liken, this is mind training. And a lot of the other relationship experts we've been learning from, talk about this. And it's like this, but this is, I think this is like this, it's almost like this bigger consciousness that that we're all kind of circling around now. I love it. I really do. Yeah. It's like this we thinking. Terry Real talks about it. It's not about you and me. It's we. We have to face this challenge together. It's like almost like this outside thing. I know there's two people here, but it's like the two of us have to be together to face this challenge, not you against me. Right? Sure. Yeah. The way I like to describe
so how
that
do you
is
explain this to couples? Right? Because I'm sure you have to, it's like a mind shift.
Yeah. Well, I use an analogy sometimes to explain just exactly what you're describing of like, the goal, when you're trying to figure out an argument, it's like if like the argument is like a soccer ball, the goal is to kick the soccer ball back and forth, not to kick each other back and forth. And so it's like the thing you're trying to solve is the problem. It's the thing at hand. It's the negotiation. Like I said, it could be the it's the financial situation. It's what to do about your in-laws. It's what to do about the funeral that you have to plan. It's what to do about the kid that's acting out in a way that you're really worried for their safety, and you're really worried they're making decisions for their life that is actually going to end up in this terrible place. And so one of you is taking a more passive approach to that. One of you is taking perhaps maybe a more critical, a more activated approach to that. Both of you are frustrated at each other for how you're acting towards your kid. It's like, it can be really frustrating. It's like, they're not listening to me. They're not seeing where I'm at here. They're not being there for me. Like the main complaint is they're not meeting my needs. They're not doing what I need in order to be okay in this circumstance. And it's not like, I think that that's wrong. That's not really what I'm trying to convince people of, that that's a bad thing or that's wrong. It's just like, we need to pivot our attention to a totally different domain. And it's exactly what you just described. It's how do we come together towards the problem versus being at each other's throats? And that, I think, the first step in being able to establish that, I've always thought, is acknowledging that we actually have the same goal. We both want our kid to be okay.
Yes.
And that's actually a really helpful starting point. It seems like a given, but it's not always a given, and that will actually relax a lot of the intense feelings. It's like, we both want to connect physically and romantically. We both want to have a really, connected and intimate and fun romantic life where we go out on dates and we're enjoying all these, novel experiences. We both would love to travel. We both, you start to nail down what are the things that we actually both want. And then what you find is you often have a difference in strategy. And you think they just don't appreciate what I want. They just don't have an acknowledgement for my needs. They don't care about what's important to me. And I'm like, I often challenge that, because at least at the beginning of the relationship, you both wanted the same thing. And maybe not all the same things, but I just wonder if like 90% of it is actually fairly common. Like it's especially hard when you're in situations like, well, they want kids and I don't. But even in circumstances like that, it's like, zoom out even further. Well, what do you really both want? Maybe you both want the ability to pursue things that are meaningful and also to feel the freedom to have the flexibility to enjoy those things. Maybe you want a legacy. Maybe even the partner that doesn't want kids wants a version of a legacy, but they think, of pursuing that legacy through their career. They pursue that legacy through their activity within their community or their church or something. And so if we can zoom out, it's like, well, what's the overall goal? It's like, well, it's kids. Okay, we'll zoom out even further. Like, what's even the goal of that? Well, I when I was young, I watched my mother and my grandmother, and I watched, just like this family tradition of having kids and passing that along. And I just imagined the second half of my life being surrounded with the people that I love. And there's a lot of different ways to solve that. One of them could be that maybe your partner didn't realize how much that dream wasn't just attached to the prospect of having kids, but is actually deeply embedded in how you saw your life from the beginning since you were young, that some of those experiences are like key emotional, dreams for you. It's not just, it goes far beyond just the surface level of, do we want to have to deal with diapers or not? Or maybe on the other end, maybe there's a way that you could have like a really fulfilling, full life full of community and rich connection to people that you care about that aren't necessarily your biological children. Certainly many parents and couples are thrust into that circumstance, even just from biological, reasons. And, that the IVF treatments failed, or, there's some sort of catastrophe that resulted that they couldn't have kids. They're not doomed. They can live fulfilling, wonderful lives. And we grieve that prospect all the same. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's lots of flexible ways to achieve dreams.
Yes.
And strategies are flexible. My guess is that the overarching dream, the overarching values that drive your life are actually fairly shared. I think that we often share that with the vast majority of humanity, and we especially share that with the people that we partner our lives to, in whatever degree. I don't know.
So, and you do use the word negotiation rather than conflict a lot, which I'm like, yeah, okay, this is, and if you can come at it from this approach that we're talking about, the we approach, then you can look at a lot of these differences that you have as, okay, we got to negotiate this, right? But you do teach, which is great, is that you want, if you really want to talk about the things that matter most to you, you want to do that in an honest and a loving way, right? Yeah. Okay. So how do you, and because this is the other thing too, you also talk about consent. This is something that I was like, I don't really think a lot about, But this is an important part of your negotiation or conflict resolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we
that's
talk about that, Matthias? About, obviously the honesty part and the most loving part and consent. Why is consent so important? And what happens if you don't have consent?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and that's a bit of a strange idea probably for people listening that don't have the full context of it. I guess the idea is you want your partner to feel completely on board and completely excited about the solution that they have. And you don't want people to be agreeing with you out of appeasement or out of guilt, because that doesn't protect their ability to give full consent. I guess that's my point in that moment. So like, if I'm just guilt tripping you into having sex, then, like, it's not like that person's super excited about that experience. It's not like that's actually a close emotional encounter. It's like that person, there was a part of that person that wasn't allowed to come to the table and negotiate. And I guess within the honesty, there's kind of like that model within the workshop that I break down, that what you really want to start with is you want to start with being honest. You don't want to avoid the fight. You don't want to just push it off. You don't want to just kind of discard your experience. That isn't really helpful either, for the reasons we laid out at the beginning of this podcast. Well, you want both perspectives to be able to be engaging the problems that are often very complex. You want two minds, set on that problem, not just one. And then, from that point, you have to do it in a loving way. And the way that I break that down, I have a few different ways, but one of them is that you don't, embed it with lots of accusation and criticism.
Yes.
It's really hard for someone to be able to absorb what you're trying to say and to negotiate through different strategies when they're being attacked constantly. And the reality is, like, they might merit the attack. Like, when you say, like, you're always late, that might completely be the case. That might be true. But when you infuse those accusations, often it changes the topic of conversation, and then you're kind of off to the races on talking about something else. For example, like, you come home and then, I don't know, you're trying to get home for dinner and you're late, and then your partner comes at you like, oh, you're always late for dinner. And you're like, oh, I'm not always late. And it was like, well, yeah, you are. You were late last Thursday. It was like, no, last Thursday it was just because my car broke down. And like, it wasn't just because I was like late and I wasn't organizing something. It was because of, like a real reason. It was like, well, was this a real reason? It was like, well, yeah, like I had stuff at work that was happening. It was like, gosh, you just never really pay attention. You just don't prioritize the fact that I'm here making dinner, trying to make sure that things are happening. The kids are going crazy around this time. Like, you just don't really care that I'm just having to shoulder all this by myself. Yes, I do. I care that I'm like that about you. Like, I'm trying to get home.
This whole argument is just going down. Like you said, it's like, this is so common though.
So common. And what gets lost in that moment is you're off on the races on some sort of tangent about, like, if you care about the kids being tired and crazy or not. And the thing that gets lost is, what time should I be home? That's actually the topic that you were trying to talk about. But then you talked about last week when you were late, and then you talked about the car, and then you talked about work, and then you talked about, if one partner senses the urgency of how tired the kids are and that, you need to come and help relieve them. Like, you're dancing all around the conversation. You're not actually having the conversation of, what time do we both agree that I should be home? And the reality is, when you infuse an accusation, when you're kind of blaming somebody, even if it's justified, it is distracting towards that end. And so you need to find a way.
And it triggers defensiveness. Immediately, almost, right? Because you're defending yourself, and now it's almost like you've lost that goal of like bonding and connection. You're like, okay, now it's like me against you. It's just, that is the dynamic you're playing.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. So that's, and then that flows into the consent piece, because, if you're just accusing people, if you're using a lot of blame, again, even if it's justified, you don't care about me, you don't, appreciate me, you don't see everything that I do at work, when you're infusing these things, then the other partner isn't trying to help solve the problem. They're just trying to get out of the argument because this is stressful and hard. And they're trying to feel vindicated. They don't want to feel accused, and they're trying to defend their own reputation and their own perspective. All of these activities are anything but productive in trying to negotiate. And so the model that I kind of break down in the workshop is you want to actually say things honestly, but you want to do so in a non-accusational way. And I break down in the workshop a different method for being able to do that, and how to speak your truth, but being able to say that in a way that's non-accusational. And then how to maneuver through negotiation in ways that protect the other person, the other person's consent. And that's just another way of saying that the other person can be on board. The other person can feel 100% excited and down for it. And they take personal responsibility for that decision. They don't feel resentful later. They don't feel like, well, they guilted me into it. They talked me into it. I had no choice. Like if I didn't agree, they would have been mad for the rest of the night. If I didn't agree, they would have been all quiet and punishing and passive aggressive. Like you want them to 100% agree because they take personal ownership over the decision. That's what I mean by consent there. It's like, I want to do this because I 100% am stoked about it, not because I feel under duress, not because I feel manipulated, not because I feel like, well, you're just going to be a complete hot mess if I don't do it. Like that doesn't lead to healthy negotiation, because all that does is push off the conflict for like 6 months down the road when that resentment builds up and builds up and builds up. And then, well, then you're back in the thick of it. You want a solution that feels good, and then you can like put your stamp of approval on it, and then you can move on.
Yes.
And so that combo of like, be honest, do so in a way that's compassionate and loving. Don't be accusational. Not even because it's like morally a bad thing, although it might be, but it's like, it's just not very pragmatic towards the end of negotiating.
That's right. It's not, you're not being productive or pragmatic. Like,
it's just not in your best interest. I mean, beyond, if it's right or wrong, it's just not in your best interest, because you might feel justified, but that's almost beside the point.
Yeah. So in the example you gave, Matthias, about the person coming home late, and, this other the partner is like, okay, I've made dinner, I've been with the kids all day, I'm freaking exhausted, and you're late again. Okay. So the other approach would be, I feel upset and angry, and I'm physically exhausted from a day that, what a day. And I also, you don't want to use the word like, I feel very disrespected when you're late, because that's not a feeling. That's a thought. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like you don't care about me. It's not an emotion.
No, I feel like you don't care about me. That's it, because that's an accusation.
It's not emotion. Yeah. No, okay. That's not on the wheel chart that they teach you.
So can you please, as an individual or couples therapist, please walk me through the right the wording around.
Wording's tricky. I mean,
totally. Let's just give an example of a good I feel statement.
Well, and let's just acknowledge too.
Blaming
Yeah. Well, let's just acknowledge too, it's hard to think of the right way to word it when you're in the heat of the moment.
It is.
And a lot of these things can feel clunky and a little bit therapist-y. And the reality is that these are skills. These are skills that you build up. And any skill is clunky when you first use it. And it always feels unnatural. Like that's something I actually prep clients on, is like, I'm going to teach you these relational, like conflict resolution skills, how to phrase these things. It's not going to be how you normally would phrase it. How you normally are phrasing it is not working. Okay. So like we need a new way of phrasing it. Right? Right. So I'm going to teach you a new way. It's going to feel awkward.
Yeah.
But here's the reality, is that authenticity is not about what feels natural. It's about what's aligned with my values.
Oh, I like that. We're going to quote this, Matthias. That's a good one.
It's a good one. Authenticity is not about what feels natural. It's about what's aligned with my values.
I like that.
Because what feels natural might be losing your temper. But maybe what's aligned with your values is expressing the truth behind that anger, but in a way that the other person can receive it, in a way that's full of compassion and understanding.
Yes.
Yet grounded in the truth. And that's an incredibly hard line to pencil down. And I think the expectation that I can just use something like an I feel statement and that will solve all my problems is not grounded in reality. So when I say, here's how to use an I feel statement, what I'm saying is, here's maybe the rudimentary steps to start practicing, and you're going to engage it in your own voice and in your own way. And you're going to find that certain things work with your partner, and some things make your partner go, why are you talking like that? And then you find a different way to say it. And so, the basic structure, and this is actually inspired by the Gottman model. So that's something I really lean into pretty heavily in my couples work, is the work of John and Julie Gottman. Would be something like an I feel statement. So talking about the emotion you feel, and then asking for essentially a positively stated need. And what I mean by that, by positively stated, I don't mean like happy or like positive emotion. What I mean is, it's asking for something that you want them to do rather than what you want them not to do. So I could say, to my kid, maybe my kid's, running around the pool, and I say, stop running. That's a really vague instruction, because does that mean stand still? Does that mean walk? Does that mean, what do you mean stop running? So you want to say it positively, or you want to say what you should do, not what you shouldn't do, but what you should do. So like, hey, walk slower, or if you're on the phone and your kid's, bugging you and talking and being really loud, you could yell, shut up. But that's not clear. Does that mean stop talking for the rest of the day? Does that mean, just talk a little bit quieter? Does that mean I can just leave the room and then I can talk at full volume so that mom can be on the phone. Like there's a lot of ambiguity when you say things, what you shouldn't do, a negatively stated need. But if you said, hey, please go into the other room, mommy's on the phone, or, like that's positively stated, it's really instructive and the person knows exactly what to do to be able to satisfy what you need in that moment. And so that's the second component, is a positively stated need. The first one is to preempt that with the emotion that you're feeling. Because again, what you want to do is you want to draw them into understanding your experience, and you want them to be motivated to fulfill your need, not out of guilt, not out of shame, not out of, duress, but because they warmly connect to you and they warmly see how something's affecting you, and you want them changing because they care about you. And they do. But it's hard to access that with a lot of accusation. So something like, hey, I've been trying to manage the kids and get stuff ready for dinner. I've been trying to cook all this, and now the meal's cold. You got home 30 minutes late, and you know how fried chicken kind of gets soggy after a while. And so I'm really disappointed because I spent 2 hours trying to make this chicken and marinating it and all this different stuff, and now it's soggy and it's not going to be as good. I feel super honestly depressed about dinner, and then I feel really anxious about what to do about
I was excited and now I'm depressed.
Yeah, I'm just depressed. I'm so disappointed you weren't home on time. I wanted to share this great meal with you. I wanted you to eat it fresh because I was so excited. I spent a lot of time planning and making it for you. Hey, next time, I need you to be home on time, or at least let me know if you're going to be late so that I can make this meal fresh for you, because I'm really excited. And honestly, I could really use the help with the kids as well. If you could come in and immediately grab the kids so I can finish dinner and put things on the plate, man, that would make my evening so much better. Can you see how you got to say everything that you felt?
I really like that.
Yeah,
really
but it
good.
felt totally different. It was an invitation, right? Into strategy.
So I know myself, Matthias. I could just say, okay, these are the skills that I am working on. Really, it's like you said, it's a skill. All of this is really.
Yeah.
And I think for myself, because I'm a very emotionally charged person, if I'm upset about something, it's I'm going to do my best to do the I feel statement, and then I'd be I'm going to be back in 5-10 minutes after I cool down, and then we'll leave. How about that? I'm going to take a break.
I don't know where the quote came from, but I heard someone say once that the antidote to anger is delay.
Delay.
I love that. The antidote to anger is delay.
I'm not really good at taking breaks either, but I'm just thinking to myself, if I try to do an I feel statement in a very, I could be really heated about it and and then I'm fine, and then I'll be back.
Totally. And I think most people feel guilty about the delay thing, putting it off, because we feel okay, if I don't bring it up now, I'm never going to bring it up. And my response to that is make a deal with yourself that you won't. The reality is that you do need to go in not all hot and bothered. You do need to go in with a little bit of self-control. That is the truth. And so if you're feeling activated, if you're feeling frustrated, take some responsibility personally to go cool off, or to wait for a moment to engage the conversation when you can feel at least 50% activated, not 100%. Because if you go in really hot and heavy, it's going to do more damage. And I think a lot of us don't want to just push it off because I don't want to avoid the emotion. I don't want to repress it. It's not fair that I have to put up with this. He deserves to hear it. And I'm I 100% just delay it just a little bit. Because if you can go in with a cooler emotional temperature, then you're actually going to get more of what you want. It's not because he deserves you being nicer or something, or she deserves you being nicer or something. It's you want to approach it honestly. You want to approach it compassionately, kindly. You want to approach it in a way that invites them into your positively stated need out of their own will, not because they feel guilted or, whatever. You want to respect their consent is another way to think about that.
Yeah.
So that's.
So I loved how your workshop, and you talked about this in the beginning too, Matthias, about how you teach, and I think this is so good, about the personality styles.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I've never really focused a lot. I've never really, because every week we interview a different relationship expert, and I'm not a lot are talking about personality differences and how it's this is how, a lot of who we are, how we are, is because we're wired that way. It's just this is part of who I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
right. Putting
the focus on that part of how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're just different people with different backgrounds. The way we were raised is so different, different cultures, and just personality quirks. It's just okay. So, and this was I'd never heard of the Big Five personality. Is it types, traits?
Yeah. Big Five personality traits. Yep.
Yes, I'd never heard of that
Big Five
before.
personality model. Yeah.
Yes. So I want people to take your course, but I just thought this was a very so the acronym's OCEAN, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So it's made up of like 5 different traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Yeah, it's a great personality model. The reason that I shared it in the course was because we moralize the intersections of our personalities, meaning that when we conflict with somebody, we make it about their moral insufficiency.
This does happen a lot.
Yeah. So if I'm really extroverted and then my partner's really introverted, it's really easy for me to be like, why are you so socially anxious? Why aren't you more outgoing? Like, why do you always get quiet and stand in the corner? Why won't you just relax? Like, that's the common breakdown of the extrovert, of the introvert, is like, you just need to chill. You need to relax. You need to unwind. Hey, when you have a little wine, you can loosen up. Why can't you just get there, on your own? And so that's moralizing. It's moralizing. It's making something that's about personality temperament into a moral deficiency. And the same thing can happen with the other one. The introvert will usually moralize the extrovert by saying that they're essentially kind of bullheaded and arrogant, and they, try to draw all the attention onto them, and they're kind of, I don't know, like trying for the limelight all the time, and they're really not courteous of other people's needs. They're not courteous about how their jokes make other people feel. They'll often make jokes at other person's expense, and sometimes embarrass other people in front of a large crowd, and not be very courteous or mindful of how they feel about that. And so they see the extrovert's boisterousness as incourteous, rude, unrestrained, and exhausting. And so if you don't maybe have a time to take a step back and to really do some self-reflection around, am I just a different personality temperament than my partner? And have I been moralizing and turning their differences into moral faults? And I think what you might find is that the majority of your biggest arguments are at the intersection of your personality. Your fights about money, it's not just about someone's a spender, someone's a saver. That's not specific enough. So that someone might be high in trait conscientiousness. They're very tidy people. They're very organized and orderly. And then you have another person who's high in extroversion and trait openness. And that's a person who's really creative and loves new experiences. They love novelty. They like trying new things. They're a bit disorganized. They chase the moment. They chase the vibe. And that's actually what attracted you to them in the first place, was because they made your life more fun and interesting. And then you're mad that they're spending all your money. And it's like, those exist at the intersection of personality markers. Yeah.
You must find this is such a common thing, but it's having that understanding and that training that you do as a psychotherapist to understand how the human mind really works. Because like you said, I think it's like in the beginning, all these things that are so different about your partner that attracted you to them, it's like opened you up to different ways of being and thinking, right?
Right.
And then once you're with somebody and you're living with them and you're partnered with them, it's like these things that you were so different in the beginning are now like really like, oh no, they're too different from me. We need to be more similar. And and then when they're not, like you said, it's like demoralized. It's turning into a moral conversation rather than, well, that's their personality. So you're helping couples to really look at that perspective too, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's something that's self-evidently true once you start looking at it. Like, I don't know, like what's cool is I have people take a personality test called understandmyself.com. So I don't have my own personality test. I'm not I don't know. I don't have the training to build a test like that.
No,
but there's lots of really qualified tests. There's some that are free.
Understandmyself.com. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, that one's like $10. And then there's a few other ones that are just free on there. And so you take the test, and I know that understandmyself.com, they'll do one where you can take one and your partner can take one, and then it compares and contrasts you two and talks about where you're likely to misunderstand each other and where you're likely to understand each other. So that's fun. I mean, fair warning that the site doesn't do a very great job of explaining trait neuroticism, and it just sounds like a pretty negative thing.
Neuroticism doesn't seem like, but you explain it as in, it's really a simple way. I didn't realize that neuroticism, because that's the end in OCEAN.
Yep. Yeah. So well, we never used neurotic as a compliment. That's for sure. So yeah, people are pretty offended to say like, what? I was 90% score neuroticism.
Neurotic? I didn't know
this dumb test. This is stupid. Yeah. Like the Enneagram doesn't make me feel this bad. So there's that. But I think that two things about that point. Just, I know this might feel like we're in the weeds a little bit, but it's worth saying just so someone doesn't misunderstand it. Neuroticism, it's really hard to tell if that's a core part of your personality. Is that neuroticism, by the way, is sensitivity to pain. That just means like if you were to experience something kind of, intense or something maybe disturbing, you would feel and experience the pain of that event to a higher degree than someone who's low in neuroticism. So there's some people that are really go with the flow, really relaxed. People, their boss yells at them. They don't go home and ruminate about it. They're just like, oh, well, whatever. I guess he was having a bad day. And they just kind of go on. And then there's other people, their boss yells at them and it's like, it messes up their week. And so you could say that someone who, ruminates on that more is higher in trait neuroticism, but it's really hard to tell if that's because of like trauma in the past, if that's like because something happened to you and you got some wounds to heal, or if that's like because temperamentally you're just a more sensitive person. I find that if it's temperamentally like that you're higher in neuroticism, that doesn't actually work itself out into feeling like high levels of depression and anxiety all the time. That especially once you kind of heal the wounds underneath of the painful things that you've been through, it makes you a really like sensitive and like warm person to other people. Like you're just really in touch with like the vibe of a room. You can walk in a room and tell if it's awkward or if it's, if it's really warm and you are really good at telling if you can trust people. You're good at telling if something's safe or not. You're very protective of other people.
I think I'm very highly neurotic.
Yeah. Hey, I'm
gonna take this test but what I'm learning, because I have a coach that I work with as well, and she's teaching me, because I know that I ruminate, and I think that people because you just can't, your mind is on a cycle of like thinking over and over and over. I'm just like trying to learn how to not ruminate so much, and I'm sure that might be a trait of somebody who's on a highly neurotic scale.
Perhaps, but
I'll see.
And I say that just because I don't want people to get offended when they take the test and the test tells them they're
neurotic.
All that says is you experience a lot of negative emotion. You're having a hard time. That's all that says. It's like, man, you're just in the thick of it, man. And, so that when you see that, don't be like, oh, I'm just the kind of person who's weak or sensitive, or I'm just anxious and there's nothing I can do about it because that's just my personality. I'm like, no, that's the wrong conclusion. It's really hard to differentiate between like trauma-based neuroticism and personality-based neuroticism. It's often the case when you go to therapy and you have some like really just some basic skills around how to handle traumatic events and do some internal work and some healing, that like your overall day-to-day experience is really positive and really warm. It's more so the case that, you're sensitive to the world around you, and that when things happen in the world, you pay really close attention. And that's actually has just as much of a bright side to it as a shadow side. So that's my disclaimer for the Big Five. Yeah. It's going to be fun to get neuroticism.
I'll let you know how it goes, Matthias. I'll see what my personality type comes up with.
I get so much negative pushback on that test. It's you wouldn't believe it.
Oh, do you? Okay, well, I'll be kind of.
Well, and it's from highly neurotic people who score high in neuroticism. And I'm like, whoa.
That's hilarious. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So, so you talk about, ways that we can, obviously at the end of the day, if you've got people that are in couples therapy or individuals that are coming, we want to improve and grow and increase our connection to the people that we love the most and to ourselves. Right. And really, and you do talk about, and the Gottmans. I did want to mention that my husband and I took, a weekend intensive with the Gottmans.
Oh, cool. That's
Julie
awesome.
and John. It was fantastic.
Oh, with them personally?
Yes. It was during
how
COVID.
Was that? I bet that was great.
It was incredible. They were in their home in Washington.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it was a virtual. But I mean, because we couldn't do the in-person, it was COVID. We signed up for the in-person and then we had to, but it was definitely in person. Like it was fantastic. And what they teach is, yes, it's the day-to-day, it's the little things. And you talk about this. It is, this is not, yes, you can go on these beautiful vacations and plan, a beautiful date and have these experiences with your partner, which I think are important. Yeah. But really, it's the day-to-day. It's the small things that matter. It's the everyday exchanges and that are going to help you keep and build your connection.
Yeah, well said.
Right? And so it's about being invested in what your partner cares about. And you give these great examples about with you and your wife, Paige, and how, like, you were talking about during your workshop about ice, and you're like learning how to make these beautiful cubes of ice and the science of ice and whatever else. It's like, obviously, well, not obviously, but
really
she's not like totally into ice, right? But,
no, she's not. It's so funny. Yeah.
She'd like to learn about that.
These crystal clear ice cubes. I wanted, I was making like whiskey cocktails, and sometimes when you go to these really like bougie cocktail bars, they'll have this like crystal clear ice. It looks like a brick of glass. And I thought that was cool. So I wanted to learn how to make, crystal clear ice myself. And there's lots of different methods. You can boil the water to a certain point to get rid of the minerals. You have to freeze it at a certain temperature and take it out at a certain time before it freezes over all the way, all this stuff. And I was just talking about how like, it's not that you're taking an interest in your partner's interests, because Paige, she could care less about ice. Like I would make her a cocktail. I'm like, look, the ice is clear. She's like, cool. Does it make the drink cold? I'm like, yeah.
Exactly. And the drink's great. Thank you. Good ice.
Whatever. But you're taking an interest in why your partner finds it interesting.
Yes.
And that's what makes it genuine and authentic. It's like, well, am I going to fake an interest in ATVs or hunting or, crochet? Like, no, you're interested in why your partner finds it interesting. You're asking about your partner's first experience with it, why they found it compelling in the first place, how they got into it. Like, what are some of the memories that they have of, doing those activities with people that they really care about? Maybe it's that they grew up go hunting with their dad. Maybe it was that they sewed with their grandma. And so it's like, what are those memories? Tap into that. That's the part you're taking an interest in, and you'll watch your partner just light up. And if you only interface with your partner on the areas that you're both interested, that's like 10% of your relationship. Like, it's not very high.
That's a great point.
You're leaving a lot on the table.
That is a really good point. And you talk about intentionality and how important that is. And, I'm constantly learning, and I've learned from you for sure, Matthias. So this week I was like, I'm going to be more, like, I want to be more intentional. And it's just a little, and I want to engage with my partner in new ways to keep things, going and interesting. So anyways, obviously the midterm elections happened. And we live in Canada, but my husband's half American. And so he's dual citizen, I should say. Well, same thing. But I don't know. I don't really know much at all about U.S. politics, but he does a lot. He's like an expert. So I'm like, okay, here we go. I know it's going to be this intense, long conversation, but here we go. Like, because he just is so interested and intelligent about it. So I do learn a lot from him in that example. So I'm like, tell me what's going on. Like, so I just know I'll get the download and ask more questions, but it's like, he's engaged in that conversation, and he lights up when he talks about these. I'm not interested in it, but I know he is. So that's just an example of where,
it's a great example.
And I'm interested in it. I am interested in that because I know he is too. Yeah.
And I would say give your partner the interest in their thing that you want them to take in your thing. Does that make sense? Like, so listen with the level of enthusiasm to the political banter as you want him to listen to, whatever you're interested in. And I think when people reciprocally do that, man, it's so much just more fun.
Absolutely.
You get to show people the things that you're excited about, and you get to share. It's more fun to delight in the things that you love with someone that you love. It's a gift.
That is absolutely true. Absolutely true. That's the joy in life. Wow. Yeah. Well, I've so enjoyed our conversation, Matthias. I really, you're just as charming and kind and generous in person as you are on screen and on social, and you're just a great teacher as well. So I really enjoy spending time with you. So thank you.
Yeah, that's so kind to say. Thanks for saying that. I've loved this time as well. You're a great interviewer. It was a great conversation, and so thankful that you reached out. So thankful to be on.
Please mark your calendars for April 15th, 2023, when we at Real Love Ready will be hosting an in-person relationship summit held in Vancouver, British Columbia, with world-renowned experts who will spend a full day teaching us how to love better and build stronger, loving relationships. Buy your tickets at realloveready.com. We will see you there. Please visit realloveready.com to become a member of our community. Submit your relationship questions for our podcast experts at reallovereadypodcast@gmail.com. We read everything. Please mark your calendars. Be sure to rate and review this podcast. 2023. Your feedback helps us. When we at Real Love Ready advice, we'll be hosting an in-person relationship summit held in Vancouver, British Columbia, with world-renowned experts who will spend a full day teaching us how to love better and build stronger, loving relationships. And express gratitude. Buy your tickets at realloveready.com. The stewards of the land. We will see you there. Play. And encourage everyone listening to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well.